had the option to start recording or start transcription, but not both, so we'll see. I think I just have to click 2 separate buttons now. Okay, you should be good to go.
Cool. Welcome back to another VC Libs video code review. Today we'll be looking at a PR for the Chrono feature by our contributor, Matt Stephenson. Mia has already reviewed this, and so I'll be giving this a second glance before we merge it into our newly created feature Chrono branch. So one of the things about working on GitHub is, where does the work go? What's your strategy for merging branches? Every project has, different conventions. In the STL, what we do is the vast majority of our work goes into main. And here we have linear history. So if you look at this, it's almost 700 commits going back to the beginning of time, one right after another. We squash everything, so that makes history very easy to see. It makes it relatively simple to record what releases there were. We haven't actually created any GitHub releases yet, but we've been recording which commits correspond to which. And once we get our changelog sorted out, we'll be able to actually make GitHub releases. And this is generally reasonable because although some of our features have been quite large, implementing entire headers, doing major surgery, they tend to be things that one dev works on, either a contributor or maintainer, and then can check in as an atomic unit. In some cases, features can't quite be atomic. This has notably happened with ranges, which is an enormous 300-page addition or whatever to the standard. So we've been adding individual algorithms, individual views, and so forth, and recording that in our changelog. But each of those commits is usable in isolation. So when in our release notes we say, let me scroll down to where we added stuff. We added the allocating algorithms to ranges, or we added individual views. The feature's still incomplete, but each of these individual commits is something comprehensible by itself. But sometimes we don't have the situation where a feature can be easily decomposed into sort of smaller units, and especially when we have multiple devs working on a single feature, which we're increasingly doing. Adding partial commits to main, which ships essentially immediately, like at any time, to our user programmers, that would be undesirable. It would be weird to ship a half-finished header where classes are there, but they don't actually work completely. And not unlike simple to understand boundaries, like, oh, you just can't do hex float formatting or something. It's this class is actually unusable, but the name is there, so you would be surprised if you try to use it. So that's why we've created, in a couple cases, or a few cases now, feature branches. So if you look at our repo, we had a feature branch that we just merged, feature spaceship, and that's now gone because that feature is now fully completed in a main. But we have feature chrono and feature format. So these are intended to be relatively short-lived feature branches just for the duration of completing this feature. Then we'll merge it into main and delete the branch on the server. So though no trace of that is left, except for what gets squashed in main. And here we can do sort of incremental work without requiring it to be usable in any way for the end user. It just needs to pass the builds and the tests. But it's okay for things to be partial or incomplete, fixed needs, that sort of thing. And we have less strict review requirements. We only require 1 review for things to be merged into a feature branch. 2 is still nice, and that's why we'll be doing this second review today. But it's not required. And we enforce that. I can show how this works in our branch protection policies. So if I can go over to settings, if this will load, branches. Yeah, we have branch protection rules, and we can create separate rules that match patterns. So we have a stricter policy for main, and then anything that matches the name feature whatever will be applied this policy that requires only 1 approval. We could even lift the restrictions even more, but we think this is like a good compromise. So that's the sort of extent of specialness of the feature branches. So this commit has, it's actually going to be the first non-merge commit to land in feature Chrono. This is further completing the Chrono feature. It doesn't get us all of the way there, but it's another large chunk. What we've merged so far is all of the CS+20 Chrono calendar stuff. That was the large PR that I think we had video reviewed once and at least possibly even twice. 355, I think the number was, that added things like, week, month, day, weekday last. So you could ask, hey, what is the, second Tuesday in March, which will be, patch Tuesday. Chrono can do that now. But what's missing is the CS+20's time zone database, which has a couple components. Here, we can actually load leap seconds, which previously the STLs never recognized. And in future commits, we'll also be able to load actual time zones, like Pacific time, Mountain time, Eastern War time, apparently, and do conversions between local time and UTC. It also adds a bunch of clocks like GPS time, TAI time, the International Atomic Time, and some others. So I've loaded up the standard here for reference, and let's dive into the code. So one of the interesting things here is that this is adding, as I understand it, mutable global state because of this time zone database. And in every project, there's always, scarier things to work on, and anything that involves mutable global state is extremely scary for the STL because the vast majority of our code is in headers, and headers are compiled directly into user binaries. But if we have mutable global state, that needs to live generally in the STL's DLL, made additionally more complicated by our binary compatibility restrictions. So we've got this sort of somewhat elaborate system of where we can add new code. If stuff is just extra functions that need to be added, but no mutable global state, we can inject that into the import lib for the STL, which is msvcprt.lib. That is the thing that you link that lets you access msvcp140.dll. But if it's mutable global state, the import lib is effectively statically linked into every user binary. So we would end up with different copies of, say, this time zone database, or in a previous PR, the sync stream global mutex map. It's not truly unique. It's not a singleton. So stuff like that needs to actually live in the STL's DLL or one of its satellites. We've been adding these things we call satellite DLLs, like MSVCP140_atomic weight.dll, to get around this weird binary compatibility restriction. And those DLLs are loaded one per copy of the STL, generally one per process, although process can load different versions of the STL if it wants to be very strange. So that's sufficiently global for our purposes, and I believe that's what this PR is doing. Let's see, yes, we can see that has edits to STL Source, which is the scary directory with separately compiled sources, and that's why this Cmakelistex is being edited as well. Okay, so we're adding a source file and a header file. So one of the checklists that we go through is what I call the hack these files list. On the wiki, it's actually called files to edit when adding or removing files. So whenever we add headers or sources, we need to make a bunch of cascading changes to update the build system, update setup, in some cases teach the IDE that extensionless headers are C++, which it doesn't inherently know. In this case, we are adding both a header, internal header, xtzdb.h, and a source file, tzdb.cpp. So we have two categories of edits here, and we're going to have some internal edits. I'll have to add a note for that. Although that note will be when we actually merge this into main. Let's see. There we go. Now, why is it? I want this on the right. There we go. Okay. But first, let's see what edits exist in the GitHub repository. So we've got Cmakelistex. This is adding the internal header and the source. Okay, that's good. This is just the flat list of all headers, including, xtr1 comment, x3 where map lives. That is in sorted order, so that's good. And then this is being added to a special section. Here I'm expanding the context. This is going to be added to the increasingly misnamed atomic weight satellite. That's because adding a satellite is just a huge, enormous headache. We actually haven't properly documented how to do it, and we suffered through making this one. And we don't actually know how to make it again without going through the same level of suffering. Editing a whole bunch of files and repositories we don't own. So because this is being used for a C++20 feature, and we haven't actually said that C++20 is complete yet, our binary compatibility restriction does not apply, and we can add extra exports to this thing. So we're going to add exports to the atomic weight satellite, which is where we added sync stream in addition to the actual atomic weight stuff. So that's where the source file is being added. So that's good. That's in sorted order. And then we've got to change to these target link libraries. This is when we are in the CMake list, building atomic weight. And we need to inject the import lib objects. That was a previous thing that I did, so that's good. But what's being added is we need advapi32lib for the functions we're going to be calling. Okay, so this is good. We are going to need corresponding changes to the STL MS build that's listed here. It may not be exactly this file. I think it's going to be a related file, STL atomic weight. But at least this change to modify how the satellite is being built, we're going to need this. Otherwise, it's not going to link. And I don't see that edit here, which is completely understandable because nobody can use that MS build stuff except. Actually, no, sorry, it is here. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, let me look at those in a sec. Okay, so we've got this. That's good. Okay, so the thing I'm trying to mentally remember is what do we got to do in MS build to replicate this part, the advapi? Okay, so let's see what's going on in MS build. Very cool that Matt Stephenson has edited this, even though he can't actually build the stuff. The directory lit exists in GitHub, but the actual machinery to drive this is all Microsoft internal. Okay, so the source file is being added to these lists of files. We've got two of them. Okay, I understand what's going on here. So this MS build file is what adds tzdb into the atomic weight satellite itself. It's for atomic weight, and it's going to go along together with the original atomic weight source file and the sync stream that we recently added. So this is good. This is going to build it into the DLL. This corresponds to the CMake change here, where this stuff is built into the atomic weight satellite. So that's good. It's always helpful to have sort of precedent to follow. In this case, I know that wherever sync stream is mentioned, we want tzdb to be mentioned because we had just added that to the same place. So that's good. Now we've got an edit to the base file, which is the one that's mentioned here. And the reason why this exists is MS build has these separate lists of files, one to actually build the atomic weight satellite, the other to build the static lib. In the static lib, we don't need like satellites. We can just throw everything into a lib because it's always linked against the user code. It's not, a DLL. So here we're listing, expand a little bit of context. This stuff will be added to the static lib, but not to the import lib because they're special. So this is essentially all the stuff that gets built into satellites will be added to the static lib here. So that's why we see not only atomic weight and sync stream, and we're gaining tzdb, but the stuff from the other satellites, which is like special math, memory resource, and code convert IDs. Whereas in the CMake list, this is, I believe, picked up automatically. Just by mentioning it here, there's a list of stuff that needs to be built into the import lib. It's somewhere in the context. Into the static lib that drags in all of these files, whereas MS build needs to list them separately. So this is great. This has got this change here. It's also being added in sorted order. that looks good. So I think that actually completes the MS build changes. I'm running through my head trying to think, do we need to modify anything else? And should not need to, aside from the stuff that's listed below, that's internal only. Okay, so going on for adding new headers. Okay, the thing that's being added is an internal header. So it can be dragged into user code, but only indirectly, because it begins with X. That's our convention for saying, hey, you shouldn't be including this stuff. It's not a public header. It's not like, algorithm. So it does not need to be added here. It does need to be added to header units JSON so that we can incrementally build header units. And indeed, it's being updated here. So it's great. This is in sorted order. Awesome. Header units JSON is complete. When adding public headers, we need to test everything's includable by itself, but it's not public. And it's certainly not a standard public header, so no direct use within the standard library header units test. It'll be dragged in indirectly by Chrono, and that's good. Okay, so we need MSVC internal edits. We'll just need to run through this when we merge feature feature Chrono. Let's see. Don't know the best way. A comment here, like if this were a PR by itself, I would make a comment, hey, we need to, when we mirror this over to MSVC. But instead, because this is going into the feature branch, I think the right thing to do is to add a note to the project that Mia's been maintaining. So let's go to the extensions to Chrono. If there's not already a note, I don't see one. We'll need to edit various MSVC internal files when during the final merge mirror. Okay, that'll be sufficient. I don't need to link to this wiki page because I know where it is. Okay, good. So that'll be a good reminder. You can skip over the rest of that. Goodbye, maximize. Okay, so additional support files for adding new stuff. We need to actually export new functions. The atomic weight satellite is special compared to the rest of our DLLs. The rest of our DLLs use declspec DL export, which is surprisingly obnoxious. For the atomic weight satellite, we use a better method, which is have extern C functions, and we just mention them in an export list. So we can very clearly see when we're adding exports, and it's okay to do that in atomic weight specifically. So we're going to have interesting decalic. I don't know what that is. Or decalic. Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
there you go.
Why would you decrement an allocation? That makes no sense. Okay, so these are being added in sorted order. I love finding unsorted things. Okay, that's all great. And because it's extern C, we don't need to mention any mingling or anything. So I'm going to expect to see 4 functions being added in the source file. We'll look at that in a bit. Okay, what's going on with sync stream? Okay, it looks like code is being extracted. This CRT allocator that I believe Michael Riscala added, we're going to need similar technology. The idea here is that the STL's DLLs, now that we have satellites, are long-lived. They're loaded at essentially process startup, and they exist until the very, very end of the process because people need to be able to see out for essentially the lifetime of their program. Internally, if we need to allocate memory, the CRT has a leak tracking mechanism, which can be quite useful. I would characterize it as somewhat rudimentary, but it still can be quite useful. If you look for MSDN CRT dump memory leaks, I guess they call it docs.microsoft.com now, but this will get you to the right place. There's a set of functions here that every time you malloc or new something, which just calls malloc, the CRT will keep track of what's been allocated and what hasn't been freed yet. So you can ask the CRT at any point in your program to tell you, hey, what has leaked, or you can take a memory snapshot and then see what's changed later on. You can get the debugger to break, or you can get an error code. And we actually use this in a couple places in our test to actually find memory leaks ourselves. Most of the time we use RII, so we don't need to worry too much, but because we are the standard library, we have to manually allocate memory sometimes. We have had issues with leaks in the past, like regex, where we've gone and fixed them and then added a test. So the interesting thing here is that because this instrument's malloc, what if we, the STL, need to allocate something long-lived using, malloc or whatever? That would show up as a memory leak for the user, even though they don't really care about this internal allocation that's specific to our DLL. So it's okay if like Vector is going to participate in this leak tracking mechanism, because we're just allocating memory on behalf of the user. They're not going to be too surprised if a malloc shows up because the vector stole memory. But if it's internal within like the guts of IO streams, it would be undesirable for such allocation to show as pending, because it's not anything they can control. And we are promising to get rid of those allocations when our DLL is unloaded. The CRT has a mechanism to mark memory blocks as sort of exempt from this tracking. It's called CRT block, but the STL uses it too. And whenever we have a long-lived allocation, we use special machinery to mark our allocations as CRT block to get them off of this leak tracking radar. So that's what this CRT allocator does. It just adapts those special functions, calc CRT and free CRT, to an STL allocator, so we could use them with a STD map. So this is now being, looks like extracted and moved into STD. So that's cool. Internal shared H, I'm guessing that was needed for the calc stuff. Interesting, the type traits is being lifted out. I'm going to make sure that there's no more remaining uses. It is needed for true type there. And then we're going to grab xtzdbh. It's a little weird that SingStream is going to be including this internal header that's talking about time zone databases. It's fine. It's all sort of being linked into the same stuff. It's literally being linked into the same satellite, so it's not like we're going to drag in extra code. In theory, this could maybe be renamed, or we could split it out into finer grained subheader, but I'm not concerned about that. We can always refactor it later without even, breaking ABI or anything. So that's good. And in vNext, we're gonna smash all the global state into the main DLL. So it'll again be really no change. Okay, so this is being lifted out. I'm going to want to compare later to make sure that there's no unintentional edits being made and that we're correctly removing STD if indeed this is moving into STD. But this change here is fine. It's just going to qualify the allocator with STD CRT allocator. And I had a nice little type diff there, so there's no more cascading changes. Okay, so that's looking good. Oh, I wanted to check if there was any remaining uses of type traits. So I don't think there are, but let's check. This is pretty small. Yep, this is all scope block, mutex stuff. This is just using map. That's pair, that's from utility. Yep, so no more use of type traits. Great that Matt Stephenson removed this. There's no real cost, of course, because literally everything tracks in type traits, especially functional. But it's always nice to only include what we use. So that's awesome. Okay, so tzdb itself, which I haven't looked at yet. We've got some test changes. We've got the actual header where we think the CRT allocator is moving in. Okay, and then changes to file system. That's for the file time clock. Okay, let's look at tzdbh since we had just looked at the CRT allocator. Okay, Mia's commented that we should have the internal header comment. Yep. We do have our copyright license banner. Do we have a period there? It doesn't seem right. Where's the? Oh, I don't want to click on the owners. The worst thing in the world is the fact that code owners is a link. I never want to look at this. Take me back to the PR, please. Okay. I sense my computer slowing down. Let me turn off my incoming video. Here we go.
I think I'm seeing a period at the end of Microsoft Corporation, at least in like the Cmakelistex.txt.
Oh,
So
Okay, cool.
if that helps with your search since your computer's overheating.
I can tell when the navigation starts to get slow. Okay. Let's see if that helps the overworked GPU. Maybe. I did click that, didn't I? Come on. Minimize. You would think it wouldn't render anything when it's off screen, but of course not. Okay. Okay, so periods there, that's great. Got the license. Okay. So we have a new header. We have a sort of system that we use. I recognize most of it. So if I were extremely paranoid, I would compare it against an existing header. In this case, I'm pretty confident I know how to recognize it. So we're going to have our pragma once and if and diff guard. I was recently informed that having both of these is still good practice. So make sure that this has been properly updated. Xtzdb h underscore h. Yep. Include yvals h because we are not core. We are going to be including runtime machinery. If we are being compiled by something that looks like a preprocessor, then include stuff. Let's skip down to the end. Pop new, store clang, pop warm, pop pack, pop preprocessor underscore xtzdb dot xtzdb dot h or underscore h. Yep, that's all good. Okay, so we're going to include some headers here. C stood def for size T. And we now have a convention to include the CMeow headers whenever possible in product code at least. So that's good. C stood in for the fixed size type defs. Type traits for the stood true type and whatever. And then X utility. Why do we need X utility? Probably xbad alloc. Yeah, I think that's good. I could actually, can I check? I have an enlistment now, maybe.
If your computer's unhappy, I'm pretty sure I remember checking this.
Oh, okay, great. Why do we have X utility? Great, question answered. Okay, so I think it actually did click on VS Code, so that may be spawning. Okay, so then we've got our incantations: push pack, push warn, disable clang, push new, undiff new. This is because certain libraries, which shall go unnamed, decided they could macrorize new, which is bad, and the STL defends itself against that keyword macro alone. So we have a struct. The interesting thing is that this struct is outside of the extern C. So it's actually going to be C++ mangled, even though it's being returned by this tzdb. I think this does not align with our usual conventions. I think we should have the struct be extern C, which is what we do in file system. So let me see if I can point to precedent there. Oh no, let me turn off my outgoing video. Okay. I was looking for X file system abi.h. In olden times, we used to name our internal headers with the same xmeow convention, but then we constantly had to teach the IDE to recognize them as CS+. So our new convention is for internal headers to be suffix with .h in addition to prefix with x to be internal. So xtzdb.h is following the modern convention. In the X file system, which we added, let's see. It's an enum class that doesn't really get mingled. Bunch of enum classes. We do have a convention that when things are flat C exported, the structs that they deal with are named _stood. Why is none of this extern C? Where is the extern C? Did I just miss it? Oh, it's down here. Oh, okay. We do have. I guess maybe the names don't. The names don't get mangled, unless they're like templates or something. It's only functions that get mangled. Okay, so it's okay for this to be outside the extern C. it would seem better with convention to name it double_stud to indicate that it's used to talk to these externcy functions. We deliberately use the double underscore lowercase ugly to make it clear that, hey, these are like different than usual. Yeah, I would recommend that here, but otherwise this pattern is good. So let me see if I can cite X file system ABI. Where's like a good example? Any of these are really good. I'm looking for one that like just has ints or something. Yeah, like here, this one's great. Okay, so I'm going to hit Y to get a permalink, and then quote this. Okay. So, as this is returned by blah, I believe this should follow the convention of being named stood ugly with two leading underscores. This indicates that it's a type used for communicating with flat externcy exports. And then I'll just point to the precedent. I love being able to quote regions of code. This is so awesome. Okay, as this is returned by _stood tzdb get reg leaf seconds, please follow the convention of being named stood ugly with two leading underscores, indicates the type used for communicating with flat externcy exports. Yep, looks good. I'll add a mention just so it's clear. Stood fs ugly is specific to file system. Since there are few exports here, I don't think we need a stood. Trying to get all these underscores right.
Just before you jump in there, Stefan,
yep.
I'm going to be adding a bunch of new exports, so maybe a tzdb isn't that absurd.
Oh, okay. Do you recommend stood tzdb or stood chrono?
I think this is all tzdb related stuff, so I think it's better. There shouldn't be anything that's not tzdb.
Okay.
Initialization, essentially.
Let's see. So I can actually mention as is it Daniel W?
Yeah, that's my GitHub.
No, is it D Windsor? There's a dash in there.
Oh, D
there
Windsor.
We go. Yeah. Okay. As D Windsor will be adding more exports. Recommends using a _stood tzdb prefix, much like stdfs. Thank you for the suggestion. That will avoid rework and increase consistency. stdfs.
I think I think he might be already using like an xtzdb. That would be fine too, because if you look on his actual function names, it's xtzdb.
Here I just see stood tzdb. Okay.
Sorry.
And it's only used here. The others are sort of more general.
No, he must have just updated that. That's all. I have an older build.
Okay. Okay. Start a review.
Stefan, one quick question.
Yeah.
Relating to having that, struct or enum in externcy or not, if you look at xAtomicWeight.h, which I can just put a link to in the chat if that is helpful, it looks like stood atomic API level is in the externcy region. So I was just curious if there was a particular reason that use case needed to be in the externcy region. Whereas, this and the file system examples we were looking at do not.
Yeah, I'm thinking it doesn't make a difference. There's some weirdness that the compiler has around the notion of C++ types. but I think that's controlled by like whether the type has a destructor or something, and not whether it's actually declared within extern C or not. The idea being that if a function returns a C++ type, it actually gets mangled slightly differently due to weird historical conventions that we can't break because of compiler ABI. But I think just being declared within extern C or not doesn't affect an enum or a class, even though I was originally thinking it did. So I think here was just sort of unintentional inconsistency that occurred. I probably saw this within extern C, and since I had mistakenly remembered that's what we did in file system, I was like, oh, this is great. This matches the existing convention, and no, it didn't. I think either way is probably fine. We have precedent for both. It would also be we would need to do additional verification to see if we could like move this out of extern C. Although it is atomic weight, we can do whatever we want until we lock down CS plus 20. I think the fact that file system is doing it one way and atomic weight's doing it the other shows that both are at least reasonable. I'm like 90% sure that only the extern C-ness of the function matters now that I'm looking at it. Especially because the function is just going to be like the mangling for extern C is like just the name or just the name with a leading underscore for x86. There's literally no trace of any return types. You can even return, as I was briefly doing in SyncStream, just return an actual like, C++ type from it, like a, std map or whatever. So actually, no, what I had done was I would try to get rid of that by returning a void star, and then I decided that was unnecessary, so I changed it back. I think either way is fine. We should probably consider making this more consistent in vNext. For now, I think we don't need to worry too much about it.
Okay, fair enough. I was just curious because I was also wondering about that and then found that inconsistency and decided it's probably fine. Stefan will catch it if it's not.
Yeah, as long as the data being returned is all just really trivial, like integers, then it's not too concerning whether it's inside or outside the extern C. If this had like destructors or something, then I would be much more concerned about flattening it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. Let's see. So we've got registry, leap second info, year, month, day, hour, negative, reserved. Okay, interesting. I'm wondering if this corresponds to something in the Windows API, because there's that reserved for spending like 16 bits on negative, but we'll see about that. So we've got extern C and extern C. Get right leap seconds. These are all std call, which is our new preferred calling convention for external stuff. Okay, it's going to take size t pre reg LSI, size t current. Okay, first thing I noticed is that these are not marked no accept. These should be marked as no accept. I'm wondering if this should be no discard. I suspect it should be. It's internal, and I suspect we don't want to drop it on the floor. In fact, well, this does potentially scribble to size t star. The usage of this may sometimes discard the return value. I think we may need to look at the usage, which is probably in Chrono and not this file. It's not critical to have no discard, but it is critical to have no accept, so I'll mention that. Yeah, there is a no discard on the allocator, which is important. Okay. Let's see. These declarations and their corresponding definitions should be marked as no accept. The compiler option EHSC will automatically treat extern C functions as no accept. But users can compile with plain EHS, which doesn't imply that. Okay, so declaration and definition. Okay, size t star, decalc. Okay. count and size, free CRT putter. Okay, so that's a good. Okay, so now we've got the moved allocator here. First thing that jumps out at me is whenever moving code, not only is it good to like diff the before and after if the editor doesn't do that for you, but you need to consider any changed context. For us, that's often, are we moving to a different standard mode? Like, did we extract code from C++17 and move it into C++20 or vice versa? So that we need to either add additional workarounds for, you know, future features that don't exist, or remove stuff because we can unconditionally use new technology. In the case of namespace movement, here we were moving stuff that was not within std. It was just a top level, and moving into namespace std. So, and we'd previously seen a trace of this because we had to mention this as std allocator. That means that these occurrences of :std : qualification are no longer necessary because we're within the std namespace and these are not functions. So those at a minimum should be removed. Before that, I do that, I want to copy this so I can do some diffing. This is the new version. Okay, it's going to mention std qualification can be removed as CRT allocator is now within std and true type is not a function. I think those are the only std occurrences. Let's grab the original code from SyncStream. Here, oh, it was in an unnamed namespace, not total top level. Okay, so here, to avoid confusion, I'm going to call this old. Yep. And then do a diff. Okay, so some code is changing. It's good to see what is changing. We've got an annoying indentation level change. Let me deal with that. Why is... Interesting. I guess claim format one does something different with top level std. Okay, that's easier to look at. So Calyx CRT is changing to this exported std to Calyx CRT with a matching std free CRT. So that's good. And that's happening because Calyx CRT is actually not available to users directly, I believe. And then internally within the SyncStream CPP, we could just directly throw an exception. But now, because we're going to be in a header, even though it's not a public header, we should use our exception helper throwing function xBadAlloc. We don't directly name exception types in the headers usually. So that change is good. Okay, and then everything else is the same. We talked about the std there. Okay, so this is great. Close all this now. Okay, and that's it for this header, very small header. I don't see anything else that should be here. Got the new added type. Yeah, utility for BadAlloc. Okay, good. We've got a one-line change in XUtility, a new exception thrower. Interesting. Is this something we already had? So as usual, anything that potentially interacts with separately compiled code, warning level set to 100 as soon as I see it. In this case, the ominous macro CRT imp2 pure means functions that are being exported from the STL's main DLL, except in CLR pure mode, which will go away soon. These are our existing exception throwing helpers like xBadAlloc, x out of range. They're all named _x and then the thing that they throw. So here, xGetLastError, where was this?
That's in x_once.cdb.
Okay. I wonder if we were just exporting it. Interesting. Oh, was this Wow, okay, so this was old stuff that we used for our original implementation of call once. And the reason why, like if I look for execute once, I think we're gonna see, oh no, this is, yeah, that's right. This, we now have new technology for call once. I actually forget exactly how we did that without breaking ABI. I think we're just directly using call once. So the type itself can be communicated. This function exists still. It's marked as transition ABI because we want to get rid of it during vnext. It's internally used, but it's not actually used by any user code. Like it's declared in xcall once h, but the only actual users are in CPP files. So that's why we'll be able to remove it. It's still being exported though. This expands to DeckelSpecDL export. We can't remove that without breaking ABI. And we had this helper here, xget last error, in case this thing ever failed. It was actually the caller of this would use xget last error to make an exception out of it, a system error exception. So this was implemented. It's not marked as transition ABI. I think perhaps when we marked this, we just assumed, oh, it's going to apply to everything. So essentially, this function is being resurrected, which is fine. There's literally no other uses of it in the STL. It's not marked as transitions. That's fine. And it's already being exported from the main DLL. So this is ideal. We don't need to worry about adding a function to throw an exception from the satellite DLL. However, we do need to make sure all the calling convention stuff is right and that the return is right. Okay, so let's see how this is being declared. No return, M2 pure, serial call, pure Sedecal. No return, M2 pure, serial call, pure Sedecal. Okay, signature matches. Perfect. Okay, thanks, Daniel. Okay, so this is good. It's fine for this to occur after all the standard. We actually had made no attempt to sort these, so that's cool. Okay. Okay, what next? We've got Chrono itself. We've got the file clock stuff and file system. Some changes to X file system ABI-H. Let's look at tzdb.h. Since it's been looking at a lot of code there. Okay, so we got copyright license banner, including internal share to implement that Calyx stuff, the xtzdb-h, Windows H itself, advapi. I think I had asked about why this was necessary, and when user code drags this in, I believe through static linking, we need to link against advapi. So that's what's happening here. So that's great. Okay, so now we're going to implement in an extern-c block all this stuff. I'm just going to scroll down to look at the end of the file and extern-c. Okay. Okay, let's see what's going on here. Okay, so here's our function. Stood tzdb get reg leap seconds. The parameter names are different than the declaration in the header, but that's fine. We do that elsewhere in other CPP files. We've never required them to exactly match. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And it's okay because it's a CPP file for this stuff to be non-ugly. As long as we follow a consistent convention, it's fine. Okay, good. That's being marked as const there. We've already got the comment about definitions needing to be no except. Question is, does current reg_ls size, can this be top level const? We dereference it. We deref. It's never being repointed. It can be top level const. It appears that can be marked as top level const. Okay, so we've got comment here. We have the post conditions. So current reg_l size is the size t star. And then this is reg_ls data? Is this the return type or the return value? Yeah, that's what's going to be returned. Okay, so I'm going back thinking, okay, do we need to mark this thing as no discard? When the out param of the size t is small, then there's no new data. So it seems likely that we're not always going to inspect it. We're going to inspect the out param first. Okay, so it doesn't need to be no discard. And since Matt is clearly aware of no discard for the other function, I'm pretty sure he's thought of this and hasn't omitted it, so that's good. Okay, so if it's less than or equal to the previous size, there's no new data. So why is this being referred to as dref reg ls data is null putter? Isn't it just reg ls data? Yeah, reg ls data is a pointer to a leap second info struct. So these comments should not be saying dref. Yeah, they're referring to it as a pointer. I believe, cannot type, believe that all of these comments should refer to, without the star, instead of star, because they're talking about the pointer itself being null or non-null. Okay, great. I always double check that I didn't reverse my star or something and make the comment even more confusing. Okay, but this is talking about dref current reg ls size because it is an out param, and because it's a flat C export, we want to use pointers rather than references. And then it refers to the prev, which is passed by value. Okay, so no new data. Yeah, so if the current size is less or equal to previous, then there's no new data, so output's null. If it's greater, there is new data, we successfully read when this thing's not null. If the current size is 0, new data failed reading. Why would this be non-null here? And if the size is big, but we got null, new data failed allocation. Okay, why would we return non-null if there's new data, but we failed to read? That seems suspicious. Going to scroll down for actually auditing the code if I can understand why that would be the case, or if it's just a common typo. So this is the size 0, new data failed read. What do we return? Query. Sit there. Yeah, this is where we write out the size. So what if that size was 0?
Because he doesn't deallocate the array once on an error. That he's allocated on line 3 once on, sorry, line 41.
Oh, is this thing persistent?
Yeah. You have to call a destructor to get rid of that.
Yeah, but where is, how can this even be, where is it even being like cached? Reg ls data, I didn't see anything static. This is being freshly allocated. Is there a global that I missed? There's no global here. It's get some const expert text. We write 0 here. We try to open the key. If it failed, try to get the value. This is going to be a return value. If it's exceed or it's 0 more data and it's bigger, then we would allocate. So we're not persistently caching this. And if the size that we got is 0, then this should never be true. So we should just return all. I don't see I don't see how the situation can happen. So I'm specifically thinking about this one here. When we write current reg ls size 0, what is the value of reg
You
ls?
need to read a little bit further down because he resets that to 0 on error.
Oh, here. Oh, that's interesting. If it's not success. Okay, that's what I was missing. Thank you. So we get a non-zero value. We get into this branch. We allocate. But then when we actually try to fill it with this query and it fails, then we zero out the size. But we still have this allocation that we're going to return. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so the comment's accurate. That's good. As soon as I find a typo, I'm wondering, oh, are there other typos? But no, there's only the star typo. Okay, so that's good. Okay. So we've got this reg key name. Now this is interesting. This is in the STL's source file. So we should only be called, sorry, we should only be compiled one way, and that should be Unicode. So I would expect for this to be wide all the time. And we should be explicitly using the W functions. I'm assuming this, oh, and that's exactly what statement reply is saying. +1. Yes. Oh, and it has also unresolved. Yes, I absolutely agree. And oh, great. That statement reply has also suggested rostering literals. So I strongly agree. I will thumbs up both of these. Thank you both. Okay, so assuming that these are wide, and the background here is that the Windows is all WKRT, like the kernel, all of it talks WKRT. So even if a program tries to access the narrow APIs ending in A, the stuff is just going to get converted to WKRT anyways. So it's actually less efficient. You want to be using WKRTs when you talk to the Windows API. Okay, so we've got these. They're const expr. We're going to immediately assign 0 to the out param. Because it's internal, we're going to assume it's not null. That seems reasonable. We've got an H key. If this is a type def for a void star, I would really like to see null putter here. But I don't actually know what an H key is. So Windows, I don't know if it's going to occur in the Windows data types document, but that's where I usually go for definitions of D words. Okay, maybe it's in registry data types. It's not here. That's annoying. Yeah, it's going to get us like things. I could look this up in the header itself.
It's a handle, I think.
Oh, is it? Well, I want to be sure before I make a comment. If it is a handle, then handle is void star. But if it's not a handle, so since I can never remember where this stuff lives, I just do set include, and I find that it's I think it's here. It's either shared or UM, but it's going to be around here. I should not have done that. Key home cd here. Okay, let's find stir. Actually, you know what? Just go done. I mean, right?
I put a
Yes,
link in the chat, but I found it on MSDN. Type def handle H key.
Oh, nice. Okay, you're faster than I am. Thank you. So if it is a handle, that means we should be using null putter rather than 0 is null. So I'll comment that. Okay. Let's see. Found that H key is a handle. So we should initialize it with null putter instead of 0 as null. We had finally, I think, completely eradicated 0 as null throughout our code base and trying to keep it that way. Okay, so we've got a call to reg open key X. Yep, same comment there. Let's actually look at the parameters here. Because again, I'm looking out for, are there any handles or whatever? Okay, I want to do side by side real quick. Again, oh, is it? I see. It's when I only hold the tab rather than the whole window. Okay, so this is being. I want to see the whole thing. H key local machine, reg key name. Okay, dword dual options is 0. Okay, perfect. Okay, so trying to read H key local machine, read leap second key, which is this thing here, outparam, else status. We do modify it, so the local variable should be non-const. Okay, looks good. If it's not if it's not success, may not exist on older systems, treat this as equivalent to the key existing, but with no data, return null putter. And we've already written 0. That's the 0. Oh, treat this as key existing, but with no data. So it would be 0 is certainly going to be less than whatever the previous was, and it's null putter no new data. Okay, correct. Making sure the post condition is correctly documented. Dword byte size is 0. Let's reg query key value X. I see awesome null putters here. Query the leap second key, the reg key subname, get the byte size, store the status. We're going to check the status down here. Static assert that the size of this thing is 12. Okay. And then just divide by the constant. That seems fine. It's like literally the next line. No reason to repeat size of. And marked as const. That's good. To make sure that we're not going to get some, non-multiple number of units. Okay, so we're going to write that out now. This is going to be a return value. It's definitely going to be assigned, so it's not going to be top level const. Okay, so if the status is success, or if the status is error more data, and the size that we got is bigger than the previous, then let's try to do some stuff. We're going to try to new square bracket. So as soon as I see this, I'm thinking, does this need to be an internal allocation? It's going to be paired with decalc, but we didn't actually calc. This is not actually calcing. This is square bracketing. This does not seem correct. And because this is a new square bracket, this will show up as a normal user allocation. We're not using the fancy calc stuff, the calc CRT. This does not seem correct to me. I don't know what's going on here. I would expect this to be a calc CRT, and then this to be a free CRT. And yeah, this function could be, named to correspond to this one, so we aren't like assuming that it's using calc or something, but this does not seem correct, especially if it's going to be persistent. So now I need to see the context. How long is this allocation living? If it's brief, like if it's brief-lived during the duration of a single STL function call, it's fine for it to be new square bracket. But if it's going to be persistent, like cached in the time zone database itself, then it should be marked as a CRT block.
It might also be worth noting that you've commented on the very same-ish lines.
Oh, did I?
Talking about new delete mismatch, satellite DLL.
I thought that was resolved by.
It was resolved. I'm not sure where or if the changes that correspond to the resolving of the conversations happen, because like I unresolved that statement reply comment about the W versions of the Windows functions, and I didn't see that change made. So I maybe he dropped a commit somewhere. I'm not sure exactly what happened.
So I remember the context here. He basically had the delete outside of this, and you asked him to move it into this because of the overload on delete.
That's right. This definitely does not experience mismatch problems anymore because it is within the separately compiled source file. So it's pinned in that sense. But now my concern is if this allocation is long-lived, using new square bracket and delete square bracket will show up as a normal block rather than a CRT block. And that does not seem to align with the name here.
Once the data is abstracted, he deletes it immediately. So it's not long-lived.
Okay.
So maybe it's just a calc. It's inappropriate.
Yeah. If it's just an incorrect name, or something during development. Why am I not seeing this? I didn't expand Chrono. That's why I'm not seeing it. Okay. Yeah, we got the deleter there. So that's good. And it's only going to survive for the duration of this function. It's not going to return anything. It is treated as an array. Yeah, so it's really just the name then. Okay, so it's short-lived. So that's good. So it's going to be a naming suggestion. I'll comment on the definition rather than the declaration. Okay, so that's in, what was I looking at? The source file here. Let's see. Okay, I'll get to that when I get down to that function. Okay, so we new square bracket this thing. We query value against a null putter, trying to fill the allocation that we just allocated. If that didn't succeed, then write 0. We have a try catch ... in which case allocation failed. We're gonna leave it to be null. But why not just use? Oh, if we used new no throw, then we would need to check for null. But that would be probably better than a try catch. It's not a big control flow is about the same. The code gen will be a little better for x86, I believe. For x64, the code gen could actually be worse because we'd be inserting a branch. It's entirely within the CPP file. We don't expect the allocation to fail most of the time. But if it did, yeah, I don't care about the performance if it fails because the process is probably going to be doomed anyways. I think that's fine. The alternative would be to new no throw, and then if we get null, then just skip the later stuff. They would avoid the code smell of the catch ... but I'm not really concerned by it. I think it's fine. I can't really point to any user benefit to changing it. And it could be changed in the future if we wanted to without disrupting anything. Okay, so then we wedge close key. The thing that immediately occurs is, do we have any other exception stuff? But this thing should be no except. We should not be throwing any exceptions out of this, so we actually don't need to worry about III. He's asking about the return value. Yeah, so that question is open. We do have the ability to, actually, this is the CP file, so even like an STL internal check wouldn't do anything. If things go really bad, we sometimes will check something and terminate. I'm not sure how often registry APIs fail. Okay, so that question's active. If the status is not success, set last error. I believe this will allow a get last error to find what happened. Let's see what this says. Okay, after this function, it's called, we only do pure computation, and then we'll get last error. Okay, so that's fine. It's a little weird to set last error. I mean, we could just return a stood win error. That's either success or not. Like this is sort of being communicated through global state. On the other hand, if we got a win, what do we do with I think it's an X file system when we get a stood win error. Let's see. So it would be the file system header, stood win error. Oh, we would need to get this stuff, and that's support machinery and file system itself. This is fine. It's one function. It is sort of interface-ish in the sense that if we changed it later, we couldn't change that return type. And then we would need to drag into the header all the system error stuff, rather than just calling xGetLastError, which exists. It may be slightly more desirable to surface that error code, but it would be a significant change. And I can't really point to any downsides of the current strategy. The current strategy in the PR is, hey, this is just a wrapper around the Windows API function that adapts it to, nicer interface without this, querying stuff. But we still follow the convention of we're going to report things through getLastError. I think it's fine. Otherwise, we'd have more user impact to drag in system error. And I'm not worried about like the performance of going through getLastError only to check for failure. Okay, so going back to the source file here. Yep. Then we return it. Okay, so now we were going to comment about the name. Okay. The name decalc doesn't correspond to the new delete that's being used. I believe that the allocation, deallocation machinery being used is fine. Being within tzdb.cpp avoids any mismatch, and the allocation is short-lived within a chrono function call, so it can be a normal block instead of a CRT block. So only the function name seems inconsistent, possibly a relic of development. Yeah, stood tzdb get reg leap seconds should really be, there should really be a corresponding, if this had free reg leap seconds, I wouldn't have a second thought. I'd be like, oh, okay, of course get is paired with free. But this weird decalc. I don't know if it should be named delete. Delete would be fine.
I would also suggest a tzdb prefix just for consistency.
Ah, yes.
Like a get, like a stood tzdb delete instead of just.
Is that the, whereas like this, the calc CRT and free CRT are very generic, so those don't really need tzdb. But this one, yeah, this one really does. Okay, let's see. Windsor notes that the tzdb prefix would be valuable here, as this is paired with get-reg leap seconds. See, the current name is this. So they share std and reg leap seconds. Is just this one should have the tzdb prefix, and then decalc is not ideal. So yeah, I would recommend std tzdb delete reg leap seconds because it is delete square bracket. The name decalc doesn't correspond to the new square, delete square that's being used. I believe the allocation machinery being used is fine, being within tzdb, avoids any mismatch, and is short-lived within a chrono function call, so it can be a normal block instead of a CRT block. It's only the function name seems inconsistent, possibly relative development. Cannon notes that the tzdb prefix be valuable here is paired with get reg leap seconds. I would recommend std tzdb delete reg leap seconds. Cool. And then we've got the calc CRT. No discard, void star, std call, std calc CRT, concise decount, concise desize. We already talked about the no accept. This shadow or could potentially shadow the name of a std function, but we're within extern C. We're not within std. I only ask for this to be renamed in test files when std has actually been dragged in. There's no actual shadowing here, even though both of these actually do shadow std names. That's fine. And then free CRT just takes P, which was putter in the header. It's fine. Okay, so that's good. Okay, end of file. Can't think of anything else we need here, so that's good. There's no weird global state yet. I imagine there will be with the upcoming PRs. So it's good that this is being
have
added
a draft
to the
with global state in it. So
okay. But there's no other, and there's no import lib injections. There's no need for the security import lib comments. This is all good. And we have no comments that say specifically what satellite DL this is intended to be in. Okay, that's the source file down. Got a couple tests. The file clock is going to be passing. Same change in the internal skip tests. Yep. Looks like the file is being renamed and being massively changed. Okay, so that's fine. We'll look at the test in a bit. And because it's only a rename, but not a directory rename, we don't need a test.list change. That's a top way test can be wrong, is not editing test.list. Okay, so let's look at the file clocks before we get to Chrono itself. Okay, so, oh, and time check, we are actually almost out of time. So perhaps we will be reviewing everything but the actual Chrono stuff, is just all the periphery around it. Okay, so what's going on here? It looks like we're just moving file time epoch adjustment. Let's ignore white space to make that a little clearer. And indeed, we are, I'm expecting we're extracting this out, but the rest of it's not actually changing. Okay, so std f is file time epoch adjustment. The rest of the code is clearly compiling, so I'm assuming it's not going to be actually deleted. Okay, so we got Chrono, we got file system, and then we got the test change. I think we can finish this by looking at file system. Okay, so what's going on here? Okay, Mia's got a question about the Chrono Macro. Okay, that's Yeah, reasonable style question. I'm concerned about ABI. So what's going on here? We are extracting this. I'm assuming this is moving somewhere, possibly to Chrono. And then in 20, the file time type is going to change to be a Chrono file clock. In pre-20, it's going to be the file system file time clock, which I'm assuming is being extracted. We can do a quick check. Checking the guards. If underscore has 6620, else above 6620, below not 6620, and if above not 620. So that's good. We typically have 2 arrows, but I'll live with that. Okay, so is there an ABI mismatch? What's going on here? Because anytime we change an existing type, that's scary. Okay, so we're looking for file clock, which is originally file system file time clock. Okay, we've got some conditional code here. This requires further thought. If 20, we forward declare this, then file clock. Oh, is it just a type def? For ABI purposes? Is that always the true name? That's interesting. Okay, so what was, okay, so if 20, we use Chrono file clock, which is the new CS20 type. For non-20, the true name should remain file, for 17 basically. The true name should remain file system file time clock. Okay, so let's check this here. Let's find it again. So if we're going to be 20, we forward declare file system file time clock, which should be the true name, and then Chrono's file clock, which is what we actually use, is just file system file time clock. Okay, so this is allowing the declaration to align with what CS+20 depicts, but the actual type is still file system file time clock. So there's no actual ABI issue. So that's good. And then in both 17 and 20, here's the file time clock, which is that just being moved? Oh, it's being moved and then massively enhanced. Okay. Yeah, because originally it was quite minimal. It just had long, it used the system clock period, and then the time point was the thing itself, and then the now. Okay. Okay, so I'm not seeing an ABI issue here, which is good. Yeah, forward declare, that's the true name. And then Chrono's file time is the time point of this file clock. So we try to use the new type def whenever possible, but internally this is the true name. Okay. If we were 20 only, we would not have this underscore file time clock, but since we have to support that, that's fine. It's necessary. Oh, and here's where the epoch adjustment is moving within file system. Okay, so it's just being moved up to a header. That's fine. Okay, we still use system clock period. It's still long. And then, yeah, being massively expanded. Okay, so no ABI concerns there, which is great. Okay, so that's everything in file system. When I review Chrono, I want to look at, is this all good? Okay. Yeah, no other changes here. Okay, so that's Chrono and the test that I have not looked at. Okay, I think I'm satisfied with the changes that I was most concerned about here, which was the separately compiled code, potential ABI impact, all the support changes necessary, the actual changes here for the tzdb. I still need to review those, but Mia's reviewed them. So I think that's more than sufficient for merging into future Chrono. So I'm going to approve this PR with the comments that I've made. And we'll need to either resolve those before merging the PR or merge them and then create to-dos and resolve them later. And I'll personally want to note that I'll need to look at Chrono and the test for the final merge. But since we've got Daniel's PR that is dependent on this, I don't want to stand in the way of this merging. That's the whole reason we have a feature branch, is so we can move rapidly, and then everything will still be going through the normal review process of, exhaustive review of every file, 2 approvers for the final merge. So I am definitely happy now. Okay.
Awesome.
So.
Daniel, just as a heads up, I haven't reviewed the test yet. I should be able to get through that tomorrow, though, and then we can go ahead and merge this so you can make your PR.
Yeah,
okay.
I've definitely had work to do because I've been doing lots of the STLifying things.
Okay, sounds great.
Chrono.
I think one thing you can note is I managed to split it up into 2. So the time zone links are now in progress.
Awesome.
Because I'll be shipping the tzbd and time link. So just the name stuff, but none of the actual time zone mechanics first.
Okay, sounds good. Should be straightforward enough.
Mm-hmm.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
I'm happy for this to be merged into future Chrono after outstanding feedback is either addressed or tracked as to-dos. So basically your preference, Mia, if you want all of the outstanding comments you and statement of reply and I've made here to be resolved in this PR, or just create cards in the project, as long as we don't forget stuff, it's all good. Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I've reviewed everything except Chrono and calendars, time zones, clocks to SCP. I'm happy with this to merged into future Chrono after outstanding feedback is either addressed or tracked as to do. Okay, looks good. Okay, yeah, it was the no accept is the most significant. The rest is yeah, it's all like cosmetic and naming, basically. So cool.
While we have the no accept thing, is it okay to use the unique pointer? Is that considered no accept safe?
It doesn't throw exceptions of its own accord unless you call make unique.
Yeah, I'm just using it as like an RAI like cleanup scenario.
Yeah. No, it will only invoke its destructor. It will not allocate anything, unlike shared footer, which does allocate memory behind the scenes.
Okay.
So you can totally use that within extern C no accept function, and as long as you make sure that the allocation is not going to emit exception, you're good to go.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not assigned. That all looks good. Okay, I think we can call that a review. Any questions for all the various topics that we had talked about?
I don't think I have an additional question, but I'm going to put a link in the chat for a particular comment that statement reply made, and Matt was a little stuck on how to address, specifically talking about potentially user-defined floating point-like types and how to deal with those appropriately. I have some research to do into just kind of this area, but if you have additional thoughts, I think that Matt says he's kind of running out of bandwidth to figure out how to do this. So this could also be, potentially something that we track as something to follow up on, as just kind of like a known case that we're not correctly handling yet, if it turns out to be something that's really involved. But if you can take a glance and see if it's something straightforward that we have a pattern for already, that would be great.
Okay, I'll look at that comment. I'm not concerned with that. I would be fine with merging that into main with a tracking issue saying, hey, we're totally not handling user-defined floating-like types, because I've actually never seen one. And I would be highly surprised if anybody is using that in production code. And yeah, Chrono does have this elaborate system of treat as treat as floating point V. But I think we have very little, even test coverage within the STL of those, much less user code out there. So I would be fine with us not handling it, especially if the only consequence is that it doesn't compile. That means we can make it compile in the future. If it was something that was going to have like ABI consequences where we make an irreversible decision now and then we can't go fix it for the remainder of Dev 16 servicing, that would be more concerning. But if it's just, oh, this header doesn't compile if you have a weird floating point like type, then we can fix that later. I doubt it would be an issue for users.
Okay, cool. I also know that there's an existing issue relating to like Chrono floor and seal and interaction of those things with user-defined types. So I think that at least we're consistent in our bugs.
Yeah, and that issue is very difficult to handle. Like, it's totally unclear what we need to do there. Like, the specification in the standard did not think about floating point at all. We all thought it was very easy, and then it turns out to have all these precision issues.
Yeah, putting that issue in the chat if anyone is super curious, wants to read the detailed bug analysis by you in statement reply.
Yeah, as I started looking into that, I was like, wow, this is so messed up. It's just incredibly bad.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know though, because it seems like that was something that he was a little unsure of. But if we can just kind of say, we can push this conversation off till later, then that seems totally fine. I think the main issue is that he's trying to use next after. And if it's a user-defined type, then it's not going to work. Yeah,
that's CRT next after. And that's actually kind of nice because it will cleanly fail to compile.
Yeah, exactly.
UDT and the CRT is not going to have any of that. See if I can load this comment.
If it's more helpful, it's just in the it's in the UTC clock in Chrono if you already have that opened.
Yeah, I see it. 2466. Yeah, I can reply. I think can you make just a card in the project saying linking to this comment and saying handle custom arithmetic like types, but I'll tell Matt I think it's totally fine not to handle custom arithmetic types even for the final merge of feature Chrono into main. We can file a, or I'll say, Mia's noting this with a card in the Chrono project, and we'll file a tracking issue if necessary. If it's not resolved before the final merge. Basically, I think that no users will encounter this in the wild. Encounter this in practice, so it's okay to defer. Okay, I think it's totally fine not to handle custom arithmetic types even for the final merge feature Chrono domain. Natsuhara is noting this with the card in the Chrono project and will file a tracking issue if necessary if it's not resolved for the final merge. Basically, I think that no users will encounter this in practice, so it's okay to defer. Yes, and I'll add, especially because it'll just be a compile error. I don't want to sound like I'm dismissing statement replies issue. So I'm going to add thanks statement reply for noticing this subtle conformance issue, because it is a conformance issue. And then I think it's totally fine not to handle customer arithmetic types. I'll maybe drop totally. I think it's fine. Okay, I've added my comment. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, because at this point, the value to users of finishing this is far more than, handling some, custom like 128-bit floating point type, very strange. There's like big nums, so they can represent, negative 100,000 years. Although Chrono is in theory extensible for that, in practice, nobody uses that. So we can fix that up later. First, it'll be a compiler.
Perfect. Thank you for taking a look at that. It sounds like you are you planning on looking at the rest of Chrono at some point, or not worrying about that until we merge into main?
I think we can proceed now. If you've looked at all of it, I think let's just proceed ahead.
Okay.
And so to unblock Daniel's work.
Yeah, sure. I will take a look through the comments that I've made, because I'll sync up with Matt to see if he would prefer that I just push some of the trivial changes, or if he has time to do it. But I'll take another look through the comments that I made, and I'll bring up in Discord if there's anything that I would really like attention on from input on before merging into the feature branch.
That sounds good.
Okay, perfect. All right, anything else from anyone else? Okay, I will stop the recording and transcription.